والصلاة والسلام على خير خلقه العبد المؤيد والرسول المسدد حبيب إله العالمين أبا القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. There is no shadow of doubt that the lovers and followers of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib will not hesitate to take the first opportunity to show you that they love the man to the highest degree. We express our love and affection to Amir al-Mu'mineen in various ways. Many will name their sons after him. Others will make it a priority to never miss an event that remembers his accomplishments and his achievements. And typically, the average lover of Amir al-Mu'mineen will not go a day except that they made the pledge by reciting Ya Ali in their times of difficulty, happiness, sadness, and tribulation. With that, we understand this man to be a man of great blessings. There is no greater blessing than the love of Ahlul Bayt, Allah, Rasulullah, the Holy Quran. And in accordance to these holy personalities, particularly the Holy Quran, we understand that blessings are to be expressed to the highest degree. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in Surah Al-Duha, in the last verse, the last sentence, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. And as for the blessing of your Lord, then express it, speak of it, make it apparent. There is no shame in expressing that which Allah has endowed you with in the form of preaching, in the form of sharing. We all understand that sharing is caring. And is there a bigger ni'mah from the ni'am of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Amongst the greatest of these is the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen. However, there are very unconventional ways when people come to share the love of Imam Ali to their peers. It would not be successful. It would not be an attempt of success if one were to simply express to the non-Muslim or even to the very Muslim in their worldview that I need you to love Ali ibn Abi Talib because I love him. You obviously follow it with your reasoning, you substantiate your claim, and so forth. When we want to now share Amir al-Mu'mineen to the world, especially the non-Muslim world, there are ways to do so better than others. We need to first understand that Imam Ali to us is great, and that is the main reason why. Because he is great. However, greatness is subjective. It's also circumstantial. It depends on who is speaking and your understanding of the definition of great. And so one might express that Imam Ali is great to me because look at his devotion to Islam. Well, to the non-Muslim, the foundation is not even there. They don't even believe in Islam. And so that argument will not work. Moreover, if we come to share Imam Ali to the world, we have to understand who Amir al-Mu'mineen was when we say he is a great individual. Greatness is understood as the understanding of making sure you realize that in comparing this thing or someone to something else, it is greater, or at least it meets the standard. So for example, the standard might be something which is great. The closer you get to that thing which is great, the more you excel in significance. So we have individuals in society that have honed the skill of, let's say, martial arts, or let's say the skills of craftsmanship. They have a standard they live by. Let's give the example of a very reputable individual. Say of the like such as Bruce Lee, a master in Kung Fu. No one will deny that he was great in his skill. He was a great martial artist. But when you look at him, he became great as compared to the standard. Who was his mentor? When you look at his life, for example, you find that the individual had a mentor. He held him as his standard. and he wanted to emulate him. Some of us know him as Ip Man, and there are movies made about him and how he mentored Bruce Lee and he became his pupil. To Bruce Lee, he was his mentor. That was the standard. And many experts in martial arts will tell you that Ip Man, this individual who mentored this guy for so many years, even at Bruce Lee's prime, he was much better than him. Because then Bruce Lee went on to cinematography and became he became an actor and he entered in Hollywood. So his focus went elsewhere. His standard was Ip Man. So in reason, the closer he got to Ip Man, this individual, his mentor, the greater he became. This is one form of definition in determining what greatness is. When we come and express that we want to share the world, or with the world, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'min, because he is great, we have to come also from this angle. That why do we want to share Amir al-Mu'min? Because look how great he was in relation to whom? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But this meets the job halfway. Because then there are those who do not recognize the legitimacy of Rasulullah from the non-Muslims. There's another angle in expressing greatness or to determine greatness. And it's typically determined by distinguishing oneself beyond the norm or beyond the average. So there is not necessarily a mentor-esque figure in the life of an individual who excelled impeccably and became a legend in history. These people, they worked their socks off and they were predisposed, let's say, in a particular field, giving them an advantage, and they really had a good talent and skill in whatever it is they were doing. Let's give another martial artist example. Muhammad Ali, the famous boxer, the late famous boxer, who he would even refer to himself as the greatest because he had an impeccable record. The man was a champion in the boxing ring and outside the boxing ring. And interestingly enough, ironically, towards the end of his life, he has an interesting phrase that he would commonly refer to in the sense of, God made me this way, or God sent me a sickness, an illness, because he got Parkinson's disease, if I'm not mistaken, and he became very sick, to remind me that I'm not the greatest, or I'm not number one. He was always, and he is. But nonetheless, no one will deny he was the greatest in his particular field. So there are two typical ways in understanding where greatness comes from. Either comparing it to the standard, and the closer you get to that standard, or if you even excel beyond it, that definitely is one way of understanding greatness. Another form is you individually excel in that particular field where you had no one to necessarily mentor you or train you. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen tackles this both ways. He had a mentor, Rasulullah. After Rasulullah stopped mentoring Amir al-Mu'mineen, and that really was in the last moments of the Holy Prophet's life, while Imam Ali was with him in those last final moments, when Rasulullah returned back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he taught and made sure to teach Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then after the life of the Holy Prophet, Amir al-Mu'mineen excelled as an individual, and he became the standard for all to revolve around. Today, however, as mentioned previously, the non-Muslim will not hold Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen to the standard that is Rasulullah, like we might. And they may not necessarily look at his accomplishments as wonderful or great and reflect that with his character, because those are great from a Muslim perspective. He became a caliph, great from a Muslim perspective. Look at his devotion to God, great from a believer's perspective. Oftentimes, to prove greatness, you have to go to the core and identify objectively what made this man so great, such that now when we go to share him as the biggest ni'mah, amongst the biggest of blessings, in accordance to what God has said in the Quran, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, we need to understand that Imam Ali should not be compared at times with the certain people to the Holy Prophet, if they don't understand who the Prophet was to begin with, or with the Holy Quran. That's almost like approaching a non-Muslim and saying to them, you must pray and fast and establish all of these and give charity because the Quran said it, when they don't even believe in the Holy Quran. Who do they believe in? Who is someone, or what is something that all of humanity basically has agreed that these are individuals that have excelled in their fields? Significant intellectuals that have solidified themselves into the annals of history. Great philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, intellectual academic thinkers, Nietzsche, Hobbes, Locke, even Karl Marx, the good, the bad, the ugly. Compare governance of Ali ibn Abi Talib, of Islam, of the Holy Quran, with what the most impactful individuals have produced for us. Now, a good place to start would be with Plato and Plato's Republic. Why is that the case? Because Plato is understood to be the father of modern Western philosophy. Plato is an individual recognized and studied from both Muslim, non-Muslim, secular, spiritual groups. And a good place to start would be a reference that many people have heard of. You may not necessarily have read or studied or broke down in depth and analyzed the Republic of Plato, but at least many have heard of it. You know, there are always books people hear about, but they don't necessarily, they don't read it. I mean, the Quran is a victim of this, unfortunately, many times. Many people know of, understand the significance and reverence of, but not too many times will be the priority of the reading source that many people will go to. However, this being a manuscript, a collection of series of books that has been compiled to discuss multiple issues regarding or relating to justice, utopian society, philosophy to a wide degree and many dynamics of that, is a good place to start due to its relevance in society and it being recognized as a source for all those who want to excel in academia. As in, if you've gone to university and you entered in liberal arts, at one point you would have made your way through the Republic of Plato. That being said, many religious worldviews were also built on the doctrines that were established by these individuals, Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. For example, St. Augustine, who was a saint from the Christian scholarship, based a lot of virtues from the Republic of Plato. Now, there has to be a disclaimer made before we continue. The following is a disclaimer. Not everything found in, obviously, Plato's Republic is necessarily authentic, reliable, and we would agree with 110%. We go to look at it and we study, there are some bizarre, proposals that have been made, amongst the which, because it highlights and denotes the ideal way of living in a society, Plato's Republic, a quick, brief backstory, is simply a dialogue between Socrates and a number of his acquaintances. This will then be tied with the standard that is Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, when we examine the backstory very briefly. Plato, being a student of Socrates, writes down the entire conversation presented. Already this is a filter in the preservation, something that was written by someone who didn't speak of it necessarily. They heard of it. That's one thing. Moreover, years passed by, and so how do you know what you have today is necessarily the same work back then? You just look at the Muslim world. How many versions have you seen of a certain story? How many ahadith are debated from scholarship just to say, did this happen? Did this come about? Was this said, yes or no? Then if we expect that a piece of work or a manuscript that was written a good 400 years before or so before the birth of Jesus to be exactly the reflective views of certain individuals that lived somewhere in Greece, then that would be a long shot that we will definitely miss. However, given that and some of the weird, interesting views that are found in this work, there are a lot of lessons to learn, a lot of wisdom, one might even say and suggest, to be extrapolated from when examining this work. Beginning with understanding the circumstances, there were wars going on, there were civil wars happening, and amongst the proposals of a just society by Socrates was a society should live in factions. These factions, we need to limit the amount of exposure they get. For example, music would be completely forbidden in this society. Poetry is completely forbidden in this society. Why? Because music and poetry, sometimes people sing about death, and we have the military, and the military is a faction in the city. And so if they hear about death, they might get scared. So there is this complete dominance, superimposing what one person believes the society should live like. That's why it's a very strict way of understanding the ideal world, and this is definitely a reason as to why we would not necessarily say this is the way of living. Another interesting element, just to get these out of the way and then examine where we want to highlight the points that we want to compare with in regards to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, is that Socrates, according to the manuscripts today, proposed that the ill and the elderly should be thanked for their services in society, but they should not be treated. If they are sick, the doctor should not give them any attention. It's a hindrance to the development of a society. So the vision comes from a perspective of what is better for the society, not for the individual. Is this an Islamic or even humane, rational way of looking at things? Absolutely not. Putting these to the side, who could say that these perhaps were fabrications? These are the edits of like hundreds of, maybe thousands of years of time. We just push those to the side and let's examine the aspects that have been studied so much so, but not given the interreligious comparison that it needs to be given in regards to Islam, Ahlul Bayt. Socrates proposes 3 elements in Plato's Republic, rather 4 elements, not 3, that he believes if a society has, will be the greatest society ever. And our keyword here was great from the beginning. Because with these 4 elements, if they are inculcated in a society, the leader will be the greatest leader to have ever existed, if these 4 elements are found. Christianity later on, as mentioned previously, from the saints and scholarship of the like such as St. Augustine, took these 4 elements, these 4 characteristics and qualities, and made them part and parcel of the ideal Christian way of living. And when we examine these 4 points, we will understand that you don't necessarily need to be a believer in any organized religion to understand that these are seriously reasonable ways of living by, codes of conduct. Socrates proposes that in order to have a utopian-esque society, we must find or include in it the element of prudence. A just leader, we would describe a guardian, a qa'id, has to be someone who is prudent, has to have prudence, to be a prudent-like leader. This needs to be someone who is wise, wisdom, translated directly in Arabic as hakim, to be a wise person. Not necessarily someone who is just knowledgeable. When we look at the translations of these works, the original manuscript is definitely not found, it's really old. And these works were all translated, ironically, during the Islamic golden age of the Abbasid dynasties, when they started taking Greek work and Hebrew work and work from various nations and old pieces of writing and writing them in Arabic. So the originals, they are not found anymore. The earliest texts we have are actually in Arabic, translated by Muslim scholarship somewhere in Baghdad, like 1,200 years ago. But the words that were always being used in all of these translations is wisdom, not knowledge. Why? Because there's a difference, a good, serious difference between knowledge, intelligence, intellect, and wisdom. In Arabic, this would be translated as al-ilm, to be knowledgeable, to be someone who's an alim, and a hakim, to have hikam or hikmah, to be someone who is wise. These are definitely distinctive because you can be someone who is wise and knowledgeable. Sometimes it takes knowledge to become wise. But you can be knowledgeable but not wise. We find this scattered everywhere throughout the Holy Quran. You might see it in Surah Yasin. وَالْقُرْآنِ الْحَكِيمِ إِنَّكَ لَمِنَ الْمُرْسَلِينَ. Allah is swearing by the Quran that is wise, hakim. And that being said, a person who is a judge is also called a hakim. Why? Because how can you be a judge if you don't understand wisdom? It's not just about knowledge. Knowledge is just understanding facts and information. Wisdom is applying them in the right place at the right time. Let's pause at this. One of the qualities of a just, great leader, wisdom, prudence. There is no just or great leader to have ever lived after the prophetic message than Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. Where do we even begin with his hikam and knowledge? Everyone here, online, elsewhere, would have benefited from the words of wisdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Either in Nahjul Balagha, how many quotes have we seen shared and circled around online of beautiful sayings of Imam Ali? Everyone has a favorite sentence from Amir al-Mu'mineen. And not just sentences and words of motivation and inspiration, wise words, actions that were taken. Really reasonable, knowledgeable, but wise actions that were taken from Imam Ali. In light of the Fatimiyya season, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was given a will from the Holy Prophet. And this was a very wise will to give. And it would be very wise for someone to follow. In that, when the circumstances become difficult for you, and your home is attacked eventually, making your wife the victim of these attacks, Lady Zahra salamullahi alayha, it would be wise to avoid any form of retaliation until you have a decent number of individuals. Imam could have retaliated then and there, because the age-old question emerges, why didn't Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen do anything in these circumstances? Well, the man had a will, and it was of the wisest of decisions from Amir al-Mu'mineen to not reply back. Because in hindsight, a collection of people with swords raised, the Imam can take on anyone, but there would be other victims who would die unjustly. You had children, Al-Hasanan, present young children, and if you had this battle, bloodbath would emerge. It was from the wisdom of Rasulullah to tell Amir al-Mu'mineen, unless you have a specific amount of people, books of literature and ahadith describe it being 40 people on your side, then you can resist. Otherwise, the wise thing to do is to hold back. There are decisions, moments, circumstances that the Imam found himself in. He had to make wise decisions then and there. And so with wisdom, in order to be a just ruler and to have a successful, great society, you must be someone who is prudent, to have wisdom, to be someone that is wise, not necessarily knowledgeable in your relative field, to have knowledge and facts memorized. Many people do that. Certain animals can even do that. But what distinguishes you is your wisdom. The application, the timely application of your knowledge is wisdom. That's number one. And we don't need to look further than Amir al-Mu'mineen for this example. For not only did he manifest wisdom, he excelled in it. The second element, Socrates mentions that a just society, a great society, not just, because the whole discussion in the Republic of Plato is the utopian society. What does it look like? And Plato is simply jotting all of these down. The interesting thing, by the way, to note, Socrates was a very fascinating individual. The reason he was sent to death was in accord, because he was breaking the laws basically by not recognizing the idols of the time. Gives us an understanding of the man's oneness, realizing that, you know what, it doesn't make too much sense that idolatry is a thing in my life. One Lord is enough for me, sufficient. The man lived to a moral, one would even say semi-Islamic lifestyle, to the point when he was dying, he even said, I have a debt, a loan outstanding, this needs to be paid. And he would constantly give us lessons. He was definitely a wise man, that there is no shadow of doubt with. There's no problem. And given that, even if he was the world's biggest polytheist, Rasulullah made it very clear, take knowledge even if it's from the lips of insane individuals who want to see you just cut in half on the ground. Therefore, there is no reason not to consider some of the words of wisdom produced here, especially if Western academia, and for that matter, philosophy, is based on the words of certain individuals, amongst them, the father of modern philosophy, Socrates. That's just a brief disclaimer. The second element is temperance. In order to be a great leader, you must be someone that adopts temperance. What does that mean? To break the word down, temperature, temper, meaning to restrain yourself. He who conquers himself conquers. To conquer your decisions and not be impulsive. To not react when you're angry. To not make a decision when you're happy. Who said that? Amir al-Mu'mineen himself. To be someone who holds their anger back when it's time to lash out, just resist. Because when you're making decisions motivated by emotions, by the heart, not necessarily by the aql that Allah gave you. Those decisions are filled with impediments, roadblocks, and pitfalls that'll be in your way and act as obstacles for making the most right of decisions. Temperance, control your temper, and not necessarily your anger. But when you're happy, chill out. Sometimes when you're very happy, you can make the worst of decisions. You're heightened. Emotions are heightened. Either sad, mad, happy. At a state of heightened emotions, never make a decision. Good advice, solid advice. Come look at Ali ibn Abi Talib. Do you guys remember the war? The battle of Ahzab, Khandaq. When Amir al-Mu'mineen is on the side, obviously, with the Muslims. And then you got this man who's the size of 2 bears crossing over the ditch, Amr ibn Wid. And he says, where are the Muslims? If you face me and you die, you go to heaven. And if you kill me, you go to heaven. Come fight, anyone fight. And they all went back and they cowered, and this man is big, until Amir al-Mu'mineen volunteered. For the 3rd time he volunteered, as Rasulullah kept putting him to the side, such that they don't say he always brings forth his cousin, he must have favoritism. No, but I put him to the side 3 times. That last time Imam volunteers, Rasulullah gives them the permission, stating the epic lines, Baraz al-Iman kullah ila al-shirki kullah. All of Iman has been sent out to face all of shirk, all of polytheism, all of idolatry. One-on-one they're going to face finally. The Imam fights him, the battle goes on, the smoke covers everything, they can't see what's going on until they find the Imam on top of this man. He's basically pretty much defeated him, but he gives it a moment, then he strikes him. Later on they ask Imam Ali, inquiring, why did you give it a moment? You could have struck him and you waited a few minutes, let's say. He said, at that moment he insulted me. Books of tradition, some of them state that he spat at the Imam's face. And this is, a final moment, I'm going to finish him off, and the man just insults me like that. So I became angry, and I was so mad. And I would have killed him out of anger, but I needed to calm down and restrain myself. Why? Such that I kill him not because I was angry, but because he made Allah angry. He had to hold himself back. Another incident we discussed just previously, the attack on the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You can imagine how mad he might have been at that time. And he was frustrated. But Rasulullah gave him a will and he had to honor it for the betterment of society. Otherwise, a bloodbath in Medina would have occurred, the likes of which history has never seen. And so he has to restrain himself then and there. Many moments you find the Imam restraining himself. Malik al-Ashtar, the companion of the Imam in the battle of Siffin, gets this close to the adversaries, and he's about to finish Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan at that time warring with the Imam. Imam says, go back, bring it back. We need to come back now. Let me continue. Emotions are high. Imam says, no. It would be wise to come back and not fight and continue the fight. And the Imam had a decision to make and to fulfill God's decree at that moment. And so holding yourself back from making decisions in moments of heightened emotions. This is described as temperance. In order to be a great leader, not necessarily, by the way, of a society, of an empire, a great leader in your own home, in your community, in your workplace, around your circle of friends, you want to be that leader and role model. These are genuine good virtues. They are described as the 4 cardinal virtues to adopt in one's life. The first we said was prudence, wisdom, hikam. The second we described as temperance, to conquer your desires, to control your temper. By the way, this also includes desires at the same time. It's all a matter of desires and your intuition then and there. But when you see it's not to your benefit, conquer yourself. Then you will be able to conquer anything else. Number 3, we see that Socrates makes it a very interesting point to highlight that the third element a society needs to have is justice. If you want to be a person who can lead with greatness and really call yourself a great leader, be just at the same time. So tyrannical rulers, they might have control, but they're not great in his understanding. How can you be great? By being just. To have control and everything go your way, the means does not justify the ends. How did you get that control? Was it through brute force, totalitarianism, by conquering unjustly, be a just person. It's like, where do you even begin when now assessing that with Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib? Justice. There are books written by non-Muslims that have in the title, for goodness sake, Imam Ali, the voice of human justice, by George Jordak. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sawt al-Adala al-Insaniya. That Imam Ali, the voice of human justice, describing that there are moments in this man's life he could have simply gotten away with being the Muslim ruler and pretty much the caliph / king, one would even describe at the time, yet he found justice to be paramount. We can look at the moments in which the Imam is caliph and he humbles his own status by coming down to the society and seeing their issues and addressing their needs one-on-one. You can look at a Christian individual being oppressed in the Muslim empire, and the Imam looks at him and he describes, what is this? To which the response came, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, it is a Christian man. He says, I didn't say, who is this? I said, what is this? I see injustice. Show me a person who is hungry in my nation. I cannot tolerate that. Get him from the treasury a monthly or whatever weekly paycheck to provide to him until he is no longer able to basically live any longer, basically until he dies. Give him from Baytul Mal, the money of the treasury, a salary, basically a retirement fund, until the man doesn't need it anymore or he goes back to his Lord. I don't care if it's a Christian individual, this is injustice. Moreover, a great place to look at when comparing justice are the heads of justice circles. So for example, the United Nations would be amongst the biggest heads of those spearheading justice in society, albeit many people will question decisions and whatnot. Nonetheless, the claim is that a just, humane organization. The former executive head, Kofi Annan of the United Nations, what is to be understood as the biggest organization of humanity and humanitarianism, made it a very clear point to state that the example of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib is the fairest, most just example of any leader to have lived and ruled this world. And the nations, particularly the Arab nations, the Arab nations, should take his example. Following it with the wonderful story of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he sent out his companion, Malik al-Ashtar, to Egypt. And he made that beautiful letter and statement that will always be in our hearts. Understand, O Malik, الناس صنفان أما أخ لك في الدين أو نظير لك في الخلق. That people are two, either your equals in humanity or your brothers, sisters in faith. And this is all we need to live by to understand how we engage with others. Justice to a degree like no other. In fact, in the 39th year after Hijrah, how an Islamic society functions is that when you give your zakats or khums or sadaqah, it goes to the treasury. Treasury redistributes it back to the people in need. And so the Quran makes a description, the one who is a destitute, lost, starving, in need, so on and so forth. They are recipients of all of these charitable efforts, correct? In the 39th year after Hijrah, basically the last year of Imam Ali's caliphate until he was martyred, salamullahi alayh, not a single person requested from the treasury any assistance. Imam Ali eradicated poverty from his Islamic nation at the time due to how just he was, because he would not tolerate any injustice, any bad representatives and rulers at the time who were taking advantage of the Muslims. By that 39th year after Hijrah, the last few months of his leadership and governance, not a single individual requested from the treasury any zakat or any khums. That's actually big and bizarre, because when you look at the Islamic nation at the time, it went from North Africa to the ends of Khurasan, or the ends of what would be modern day India. Not a single homeless person, not one person made that request. In fact, books of history describe the following. 3 things that happened. That people during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen's governance, just to display how just the man was, people acquired 3 things. كانوا الناس في عهد أمير المؤمنين ينامون في الظل. They would sleep under shade, meaning everyone had a roof. Everyone had a roof under the governance and caliphate of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Yeah, and he even has that statement, if poverty was a person, I would have killed him. You may not have killed poverty the person, but you certainly killed and wiped out poverty altogether. People slept under shade. يَنَامُونَ فِي الظِّلِّ وَيَأْكُلُونَ الْبَرِّ. And they would eat bread, basically whole grain bread. Meaning everyone had a snack, everyone had food. People were not starving under Imam Ali's caliphate. The third element was وَيَشْرَبُونَ مَاءَ الْفُرَاتِ. And they drank from the Euphrates River, meaning they drank pure water. They didn't have to look around and begging any longer. Food provided, water provided, shelter provided, justice provided. And in addition to that, books of tradition state that Amir al-Mu'mineen even showed his justice when it overflowed from people to animals. He would find, Imam Ali made it a point, to find, and he would make a point that tells people, find any stray animal, dog or cat, and collect them in an area, make like a shelter for all of them. Don't let them be on the street like that. Even animals were recipients of the justice of Amir al-Mu'mineen, such that it reached a point where it was overflowing his caliphate with wealth, with success, with justice, that Imam ordered people, take some of the wheat that we have, it's too much, no one's demanding from it, and go spread it on the hilltops of the Muslim nation. Why, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? Are we just throwing it away? No, so that if the person passing by the Muslim lands and sees all of this, they will even say that not even the birds went hungry under the leadership of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Justice to a degree like no one has ever seen, ever before in history. And the heads of the biggest, most significant humanitarian organizations come and testify to that effect. And the last and fourth virtue, cardinal virtue, that the greatest think tanks to have amongst the greatest think tanks to have ever existed make as a necessity to have in order to claim to be a great leader is courage. And again, it's another aspect, like where do you even begin? One can look at the time when Amir al-Mu'mineen was to travel and migrate with Rasulullah to Medina, but was told to stay back and stay in his home, in his bed, as a cover for the Holy Prophet, buying him more time, and you're under blankets while swords are going to be over your head in a matter of minutes. And the Imam would say, does this make you safe, Ya Rasulullah? So he said, yes, it does make me safe. Then I don't care. The thing is, when you'd say courage, it's almost quite difficult to describe Imam Ali as being courageous. Why? Because the main understanding or definition is to stand and resist in the face of fear. Well, the problem is Imam Ali was never afraid. The man never was afraid of anything. There was no fear. Now, if it's fear in the sense of what is commonly understood as fearful, like this is a fearful moment, yet you resisted, not necessarily indicating that you were afraid, but this is objectively a scary moment, then yes, we will agree to that aspect or to that degree, that standing in the face of fear, courage at that time, Amir al-Mu'mineen embodied. But if it's within the understanding that while he was afraid, he's resisted, that's a noble trait, but not befitting of Haydar al-Karrar, salamullahi alayh, for never once were we ever noted to have seen Imam saying, I was afraid, I had to fight my fears, my desires to go away, I fled, not in word, nor even in action. Imam Ali, courage, according to these great thinkers and think tanks of the philosophical world, must be a quality any great leader has to acquire. Definitely, when you look at wisdom, when you look at controlling your temper, when you look at courage, when you look at all of these aspects, brothers and sisters, justice, you don't need to be a Muslim to say these are good qualities. You don't need to be a leader to say these are good qualities. But when you are these aspects, when you do implement them and manifest them, don't you now see that even according, not necessarily to organized religion, but to objective truth, because no one can deny at that point, these are really good qualities to have to excel in whatever it is you're doing, that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, not just met them, excelled in every single one of these aspects, in accordance to Plato's Republic, the words of Socrates, the greatest ruler to have ever lived, to implying that these are the virtues and qualities that must be implemented, not just implemented to excel. Ali ibn Abi Talib is that great ruler, in accordance to great think tanks, philosophers, that the whole world appreciates their works. A study done, brothers and sisters, between the man himself, Imam, any Imam of Ahlul Bayt, the Holy Quran, the Holy Prophet, and these books and these thoughts and beliefs and worldviews. This is very important in today's age, because when oftentimes you look at any attempt to introduce Islam to the world, it will come from the Islamic perspective only. You must believe in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for you will go to hell according to what my Quran says. But the problem is the whole foundation is shaky. There is no Quran in this person's life. There is no God in this person's life. You have to strike at a point that they will recognize, yeah, it is a legitimate, serious, significant point. Western philosophy, think tanks, governance, sociology, psychology, interreligious comparison, brothers and sisters, today, much more than ever is needed. More research is to be done in order to get the words across of the Ahlul Bayt. Not necessarily, but very well from the Islamic perspective, from those who are interested to learn more about their own worldview. That's great. But Imam Ali, as we began our topic, is amongst the biggest blessings in our life. And the Holy Book itself makes clear, as for the blessing of your Lord, share it. I now have the responsibility of sharing my Imam to the whole planet, to man and womankind. And the Imam himself didn't hesitate to share it with the animal world, to the world of nature as well. Let's expand by presenting the Ahlul Bayt, the household of the Holy Prophet, the Prophet himself, the Book of Allah, and our understanding of God by tackling it in not necessarily the most conventional of ways. Make it unconventional. Try presenting a new perspective, not necessarily the usual and old. The Quran gives us another example of this. When you notice the story of Prophet Sulaiman and the Queen of Sheba, she didn't find Islam, in the sense of the religion of God at the time, by a da'wah session, by a lecture on a pulpit in front of him like 1,000 people, by a Friday prayer. She walks in and she sees the palace of Sulaiman. وَقِيلَ لَهَا ادْخُلِي الصَّرْحِ, and he said to her, enter the palace. فَلَمَّا رَأَتْهُ حَسِبَتْهُ لُجَّةً, and when she entered, she thought it was water. وَكَشَفَتْ عَنْ سَاقَيْهَا, and she then exposed her shins, thinking, yeah, this is water. I'm going to get my nice dress wet. I have to raise it a little bit. She walked and she's like, no, that's not water. It's water under very fine, thin glass, but it deceived me. What happened then? What transpired? She's like, you know what? If the palace of Sulaiman can deceive the Queen of Sheba, then what about the Lord of Sulaiman? She then entered that religion, the religion of God at that moment. The most unconventional way possible I could think of. How you find God? Through lifting your dress, making sure it doesn't get wet when you go and enter a person's palace to visit them. I feel like that's the most unconventional way ever. But it's a lesson. Today, more than ever, maybe use unconventional ways. If you're that confident that, you know what, I need to take that role. Let me share my religion because I'm so happy. And rightfully so. The Quran makes it very clear. Share it. Sharing is caring. Let's just bring and produce and invite everyone to our events. Invite everyone to a night of iftar. Those are great ways to do so. But sometimes it takes an interesting route. A way where when you bring about thoughts and doctrines and mindsets and worldviews that have not necessarily been given a comparison with regards to Islam, Ahlul Bayt, we will then do justice, inshallah ta'ala, by presenting our beautiful blessings of wilayah, of the love we have for the Holy Prophet, his family, of the Holy Quran, of Allah, of humanity all in general, and a new light and a way that will be very receivable, very understandable, and the greatness will be present then and there. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad Since we have just a couple minutes to spare, I would like to take just a few minutes to briefly, very briefly, and if you're interested, to have a quick dialogue with regards to what we had spoken of. I will leave the time we have until like 9 p.m. Is that good, inshallah? I think 9 should be okay, because we began like around 8 or so. So with that, I'd love to see some proposals and suggestions in light of what we discussed. Ways to introduce our worldview, our teachings, our understanding to both the Muslim and non-Muslim world. But the caveat is from an unconventional way. Do we have any suggestions or anything in that light? Or do I have to pick? So what I really personally love, and I feel like has worked very well, is when we have big events, inshallah, we like to bring our family. I think it's worth bringing our friends as well who don't come from that, that Islamic background as well. That's a good time. Or iftar, fasting, inviting them, because who can miss out on a good meal? And by the way, the key term here is food. So if the event has food, they're going to come. And if the iftar, if it has good food, then they're going to come as well. So those are good 2 ways to do that. Another way I saw a good friend of mine once is he made it a habit to, by the way, my friend, his name is Habib Nurmagomedov. Whenever he wins his matches, he does sujood. So yeah, he's my friend, and he told me on WhatsApp, I feel like I should do this. And I said, you know what, go ahead and try it. And so it worked for him. Another friend of mine, Mohammed Salah, he plays for Liverpool. He also does sujood every time he scores a goal. Yes, yeah, we know each other very well. And by doing that, many people are saying, what is he doing? What's that act? Okay, joking aside, but what's that act that he's doing when he goes down and he bows down and prostrates? A lot of people got interested in that behavior. When they got interested, that led them to research what exactly does that mean. There were a few people, and I hope it's true, but they made it, like they tweeted, that brought me to Islam. If you really want to know about my conversion story, because I'm such a fan of that one player, he does that a lot, that behavior when he goes down and prostrates every time he does sujood. And I'm like, what is that? One thing led to another. They said their shahadatain and they became Muslim. So yeah, these are unconventional ways. Unconventional, no problem, but still unique ways. Are there other ways that you suggest? Would be okay ways? Yes, brother? The brother is suggesting taking advantage of social media. TikToks. I try to avoid saying it. Yeah, TikToks. Make sure it's halal, inshallah. I think that's very good. Done properly and appropriately is the key word here. That's very good. Inshallah, you will spearhead that campaign. Bi'idhnillah. Did you want to suggest? Yes?
I would say invest in the stock market.
Invest in the stock market? How does that introduce Islam to?
You can generate wealth, and we can use that wealth to empower us and resources.
I like that. So it's a means to get resources to then help share the message. I mean, yeah, invest in the stock, investing in general, I sure, that's very good. I like that idea. But the goal is to get means such that we can facilitate like events and stuff like that. Why not? The more that it does cost money. What costs money exactly?
I mean, if you think about it, graphic design and
Yeah.
technology
I agree.
flyers and everything.
Yeah, Ahsant, I agree. Yeah, this all comes through your generous donations. But if you want to skip donations and go invest in the stock market. Nice suggestion, brother. I like that. Sayyidina. Oh, go ahead. Invest in what? Oh, invest in that company. Why would you ever invest in that company? But, okay, smart, very smart. Ahsan, thank you, brother Sayyid. Okay, any other suggestions? Unconventional ways to share the message. No more ways? See, the typical ways are nice. There's a nice group I saw in New York. They're nice when they're done good. In New York, there's a Muslim student association. I don't know what university, and we've done this here a few times. During winter, they pass, not pamphlets, but hot coffee. And on you know how it is, on it, there's like a sticker, a beautiful hadith, but a hadith everyone can resonate with. So there are ways to do things. Just any random hadith? No, it has to be something beautiful. Love for your brother what you would love for yourself, for example. these things. These are beautiful things. And we did this, I recall, a few years back. It's a bit difficult to do it nowadays given the circumstances, but during the birth of the Holy Prophet, passing out roses, and on it there's a nice sticker. Unconventional, why not? But beautiful ways to present Islam, Ahlul Bayt. Are there any other suggestions by any chance? Brother Ahmed, you look like you might have a suggestion. Free food? Man, you could start a revolution with free food. The Suhoor festival? Yeah. You come from a perspective of, hey, it's just a festival, but at the same time, let us introduce and teach you some things about our religion, our worldview, why this is happening. The Suhoor facilitating events like that, but that costs sometimes. So Brother Wissam's suggestion of making sure you have the assets to do so comes into place as well. These are all wonderful suggestions and unique observations. If there are any more comments, these would be lovely to hear. That being said, thank you all very much for tuning in. Thank you for showing up. Please be safe, take care, stay warm. Wassalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.